You are now listening to The Survivors Series with Kyle Fields, a One Love Media production.
The following episode contains graphic discussions of racism, hate crimes, white supremacy, violence, and other forms of discrimination. Listener discretion is strongly advised. Some content may be triggering or emotionally difficult to hear, especially for those who've experienced racial trauma or discrimination firsthand. We are not here to sensationalize or exploit pain, but to acknowledge it, honor the truth, and demand justice. This is not a comfortable conversation, but comfort has never led to change. Thank you for choosing to listen with an open heart and an open mind.
There's something about American history that they don't really teach you in school. Something hidden beneath flags and fireworks and sanitized textbooks. It's the sickness we were born with, the cancer we've learned to live with, and the hate we still haven't cut out. This isn't just about racism in the modern day. This is about how racism is baked into the bricks of this country. From the moment those ships hit shore to the system we uphold today. Racism has been a steady, beating drum behind so many policies, decisions, and American lives lost. And today, we're going to face that. This episode will be dark. It will be heavy. And it's going to be brutally honest. Because if we can't acknowledge where we come from, we will never get to where we're meant to go. So let's begin where it all started. Slavery. Not just an unfortunate chapter, but the economic backbone of early America. Millions of black people kidnapped, beaten, broken, and sold like cattle. Families destroyed, cultures erased, humanity denied. And here's the thing. This wasn't some fringe behavior. It was government policy. Protected, promoted, justified with religion, science, and the law. The Constitution, the so-called blueprint of freedom, counted enslaved people as 3/5 of a human being. Think about that. America's founding documents started off by mathematically dehumanizing black people. And when slavery was finally abolished after a bloody civil war, freedom still wasn't freedom. It was followed by Reconstitution, then the Black Codes, then Jim Crow laws that enforced racial segregation for nearly a century. And for those who don't know, a century is 100 years. Signs that said whites only weren't just in the South. They were everywhere, from drinking fountains to voting booths to hospitals to damn caskets. Now let's talk about violence. Because racism in America isn't just systemic. It's been brutal, like lynchings. Thousands of black Americans were tortured, hanged, and burned while white families took pictures like it was a Sunday picnic. Or how about Tulsa, Oklahoma, 1921? A prosperous black neighborhood, often called Black Wall Street, was burned to the ground by a white mob. Hundreds were killed, generational wealth destroyed overnight. Or how about Emmett Till in 1955? He was a 14-year-old boy who was tortured and murdered for allegedly whistling at a white woman. And his killers walked free. And I hate to break it to you, but these weren't isolated events. They were cultural norms enforced by silence, protected by white fear, passed down like family heirlooms. And then there's the government. The very institutions meant to protect us have often done the exact opposite. The FBI, they launched COINTELPRO to infiltrate and destroy Black liberation movements, especially the Black Panthers and civil rights leaders like MLK. What about local law enforcement? Well, they have been historically complicit in racial violence, often acting as the enforcer of white supremacy. Let's pause for a second and bring a name and most people don't expect to hear in a conversation about race. Lyndon B. Johnson. Before LBJ became the civil rights champion we'll talk about later, he was a Southern Democrat. He voted against every single civil rights bill from the 1930s through the 1950s. He used the N-word casually. He embraced the Southern status quo. But he also had something else. Power. And what did he do with that power later? Well, that's something we'll unpack in part 2. Let's fast forward to today, because racism didn't disappear. It just changed its dirty, nasty clothes. Racism now looks like a Black man being shot during a traffic stop while reaching for his license, a Latino child being caged at the border under quote-unquote zero-tolerance immigration policies, an Asian woman shoved onto a subway track during a wave of anti-Asian hate, a Muslim family being surveilled, harassed, or worse after every terrorist attack, Indigenous women going missing at an alarming rate and getting zero news coverage. And it looks like the FBI's own hate crime data, which shows hate crimes have spiked in the last decade. Black Americans are consistently the most targeted racial group. Anti-Asian and anti-Semitic hate crimes rose dramatically in just the last 5 years. See, this country likes to pretend racism is just a bug in the system. I hate to burst your bubble, but it's not a bug. It's a feature. And when we look at today's white supremacist groups, they're not hiding in the woods anymore. They're organizing online, running for office, marching in khakis with tiki torches, screaming, "You will not replace us." Nah, bud. Not only will they not replace you, they don't want to. They're being emboldened by political leaders who use dog whistles in public speeches and wink at hate groups with phrases like "very fine people on both sides." So no, we haven't moved on. We've just learned how to disguise our racism better. We're going to stop this segment here, because the truth is, we've barely scratched the surface. And there's so much more to say about media, about the justice system, about education, about survival. But if you're angry right now, good. If your heart is broken, let it stay broken for a while. Because that's where the healing starts. Because next, we'll dive into the survivors, the leaders, the freedom fighters, the people who looked this country in the face and said, "Not on my watch." This is Love Has No Room for Hate, Part 1. We'll be right back. When the world refused to see their humanity, they made it impossible to look away. For every act of violence, there was someone who stood up. For every injustice, there was someone who said, "Enough." This segment is about the survivors, not just those who lived through racism, but those who fought back, who transformed pain into power and changed the course of history. Let's start with a name that echoes around the world. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. More than a dream, more than a speech. Did you know he was arrested 29 times, constantly under FBI surveillance, and labeled a threat by his own government? Yet he never raised a weapon. Only his voice. He fought for the right to vote, the right to sit, the right to breathe. And on April 4th, 1968, he paid for it with his life. Now let's talk about his opposite but equally powerful counterpart, Mr. Malcolm X. A man who started in prison, who found faith, purpose, and rage in a system built to destroy him. But see, where King preached nonviolence, Malcolm spoke the language of righteous anger. He called out white liberals. He exposed police brutality. He refused to tone it down for white comfort. He too was assassinated, but not before planting the seeds that would grow into the movements still alive today. And then there's Rosa Parks. She didn't start the civil rights movement, but she lit the fuse. She wasn't just tired. That's the sanitized version. She was fed up, tired of being told to move, to bow, to vanish. So she sat down, and her courage stood tall. Her arrest led to the Montgomery bus boycott, a 381-day protest that nearly bankrupted the bus system and launched Dr. King into national prominence. One seat, one stand. Now let's talk about John Lewis. He marched across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama, knowing damn well he'd be beaten. And he was. His skull fractured by police, and yet he later made the iconic quote, "Do not get lost in a sea of despair. Be hopeful. Be optimistic. Never, ever be afraid to make some noise and get in good trouble." John Lewis was hope in human form. And when he died in 2020, a nation mourned a soldier for justice. Let's not forget about Fannie Lou Hamer, beaten nearly to death for trying to register to vote, or James Baldwin, who wrote the pain of being black in America so vividly, white America had no choice but to listen, if only for a moment. Or Bayard Rustin, the gay civil rights organizer who orchestrated the March on Washington but was pushed into the background for his sexuality. These weren't just survivors. They were visionaries, warriors, and everyday people who refused to stay silent. But let's bring this into the 21st century. Trayvon Martin, Eric Garner, Sandra Bland, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Tyree Nichols. They didn't survive, but their stories ignited a generation. The Black Lives Matter movement wasn't born out of politics. It was born out of pain. It started as a hashtag, became a cry for justice, it evolved into a global movement. People of all races marched, knees were taken, fists were raised, and for a brief moment, it felt like the world was finally listening. I want to tell you about someone else. A woman named Ruby Bridges. She was 6 years old when she walked into an all-white school in 1960. Crowds of grown adults screamed at her, called her slurs, spit at her, threatened to lynch a child. And yet she walked every day with her tiny lunchbox and unmatched courage. That's what survival looks like. This segment is about honoring those who stood in the line of fire and didn't flint. Some made it, some didn't. But all of them matter. These are not just names in a textbook. These are chapters in a story still being written. And whether you were marching in Selma in 1965 or standing in Ferguson in 2020, you were a part of that same heartbeat. The same resistance, the same call for justice, and that should make you proud. And up next, we're going to talk about how the media, the government, and our own silence sometimes holds the pen in writing this country's legacy of hate. This is Love Has No Room for Hate, Part 1. Stick with us. We've talked about racism in the streets, in neighborhoods, in schools. But what about when it's echoed through megaphones held by the powerful? Let's be real. Racism hasn't just survived in this country. It's thrived. And not by accident. It's been protected, nurtured, broadcasted. We're in the middle of a digital revolution, yet the loudest voices sometimes aren't the wisest. Some of them are just hateful. And that brings us to Nick Fuentes, a self-proclaimed white nationalist. He's made his beliefs clear, routinely spouting dangerous rhetoric rooted in anti-Black, anti-Semitic, and anti-LGBTQ hate. He's not some fringe figure whispering in the shadows. He's been welcomed at rallies, spoken alongside politicians, and hosted on a platform with millions of viewers. He has followers. He has influence. And that makes him dangerous. And what's worse, when people like Fuentes spew hatred, the media covers it like it's just another political opinion. Like it's just a debate. But hate isn't a debate. It's a disease. Now let's talk about the media's role. While good journalists exist, and we will always respect the truth tellers, there are far too many news outlets and pundits who have chosen profit over people. They run headlines designed to divide, pushing fear because fear sells. They spotlight hate groups without context. They entertain bigotry as another side of a story. They make room at the table for monsters and then act shocked when someone gets hurt. Then there's the role of politicians. Let's talk about Representative Steve King of Iowa, a man who served in Congress for nearly 2 decades, who once asked white nationalists, white supremacists, Western civilization, how did that language become offensive? That's not a dog whistle. That's a bullhorn. In 2019, he was stripped of his committee assignments. But let's be honest, he should have never had them in the first place. He wasn't removed from office by public outcry. He was replaced because the party got tired of how loud he was, not because they disagreed. And then there's the broader political system, a system that still refuses to pass meaningful hate crime legislation. A system where some politicians tweet out thoughts and prayers after racially motivated shootings, then go cash checks from donors tied to extremist groups. They say, we need unity. But unity without accountability is performative. They say, we don't see color. Well, if you don't see color, you don't see pain. You don't see the injustice. You don't see the people I call my friends, my brothers, or my sisters. What about the white nationalist rallies that end in bloodshed? What about the bomb threats to HBCUs? What about the fact that in 2024 alone, the FBI reported over 11,000 hate crime incidents and over 64% were motivated by race, ethnicity, or ancestry? This isn't ancient history. This is right now. And if you think the media and politicians don't play a role in this, think again. They've made hate profitable. And when hate gets a platform, people get hurt. So ask yourself, why are the voices of division given microphones while the voices of unity get drowned out? Why are political leaders more concerned with re-election than real lives? Why does the media choose ratings over responsibility? These aren't rhetorical questions. This is accountability knocking on the damn door. Look, I know a lot of people may listen to this and they're going to ask, well, what do you know? When you're just a white guy speaking on race, when your race is what has caused a lot of this. You're not wrong. White people, my people, and as much as I loathe using those words, have done unimaginable harm, enslaved, dehumanized, terrorized, and silenced entire communities for generations. And too many still turn a blind eye today. Too many still enjoy the privileges without ever acknowledging the pain behind them. Too many still benefit from a system built for them while pretending the system is fair. So what do I know? I know I'll never understand what it feels like to be followed through a store just because of the color of my skin. I know I'll never have to explain to my children how to survive a traffic stop. I know I'll never be judged for my hair, my last name, my accent, or the way I worship. But I also know this. I don't have to experience racism to stand against it. I don't have to be the victim of injustice to speak out for justice. And I sure as hell don't have to stay silent just because I'm not the one being targeted. I may be white, but I am sure as hell not blind. I've seen the hatred, the suffering, the historical trauma that runs through the communities of color in this country. I've stood beside my friends, my brothers and sisters, and listened as they broke down stories I could never imagine living through. And that's where this starts, with listening, with humility, with the understanding that this fight isn't about guilt, it's about responsibility. It's about using whatever platform, privilege, or power I have to stand in the gap, to call out the lies, and to help build a better future than the one we were handed. Because love really has no room for hate. Not in this show, not in my heart, and not in this country. If you're still with me, if you've felt your chest tighten and your soul stir during this episode, good. That means you still have a conscience. That means your heart still beats for humanity. That means there's still hope. I'm not trying to be a savior, nor do I want to be. I'm trying to be an ally. And if a lot more people who look like me would just shut the hell up and sit the hell down and just listen, we might finally start to heal what's been broken for far too long. So no, I may not ever know your exact pain, but know that I see you. Know that I hear you, and know that no matter what happens, I will always stand with you in the face of injustice. Unfortunately, this is the reality we live in. The one we've built with hate, with division, with inequality. It's ugly, it's painful, and it's been allowed to persist for far too long because people choose to close their eyes and pretend like everything is okay. But don't let the darkness fool you, because in the thick of all of this pain, there is light, there is hope, there is a silver lining. The fight is far from over, but we're not helpless. There are those who are still fighting for change, for justice, for love. And it's up to all of us to join that fight, to refuse to stay silent, to reject the idea that any of us can stand idly by as others suffer. So as we end part one, let me say this. We cannot forget. We cannot look away. We cannot let the hate of the past continue to define the future. We must remember the voices lost to this hate. We must honor the survivors, and we must demand justice, equality, and respect for every single person. No matter the color of their skin, their heritage, or their background. But in order to move forward, we have to confront the truth. And that's exactly what we started doing here today. Now, tomorrow, we move forward. And as I said in the beginning, this is part one, and there are 2 more parts to this episode. So, I really hope you stick around because part 2 will talk about hope. We'll talk about progress, and we'll talk about the people who have dedicated their lives to changing this country for the better. And we'll also talk about where we go from here. Because love truly has no room for hate. Not today, not tomorrow, and not ever. I'm Kyle Fields. Stay tuned for part 2 and part 3 of Racism in America. Love has no room for hate.
This episode is dedicated to every soul who has endured the weight of racism, to every voice that was silenced too soon, and to every heart still fighting for justice, equality, and truth. Special thanks to the brave survivors who continue to share their stories so the world may never forget. The historians, scholars, and journalists who've documented the truth with integrity and courage. The activists, both past and present, who have laid their lives on the line for change. The Black community, whose strength, resilience, and brilliance have shaped the soul of this nation, even when that nation has tried to deny it. And to every listener who chooses to lean in, unlearn, and stand up. Because silence is compliance, and love, real love, has no room for hate. Today's episode was hosted and researched by Kyle Fields and written by Mary Rodriguez. Editing and production by One Love Media. All rights reserved.